it will work. Okay, got it. Thank you. Here we go. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Yep, excellent. I can't see everyone, but I'm trusting everyone can see it. So yeah, thank you. My name's Richard Boonstra and I'm the State Manager for Prison Fellowship in Victoria. And I'll share a little bit more about Prison Fellowship, its background and where it began a little bit later. All around the world, people, it's our week of prayer this week too, so hence the screen that I have behind me. And all around the world, people are praying specifically and intentionally for people in prisons and their families, for victims of crime, for people who've been released from prison, and for prison management and government corrections departments. And we really view that prayer is foundational to our ministry. It's one of the key planks of our ministry, and it's really important that we highlight and we devote a whole week. We do it all the time, of course, but this one is an intentional week that we devote to prayer. It's interesting, this is all around the world. So Prison Fellowship ministries all across the world will be spending this week in praying intentionally for Prison Fellowship. I'd like to start by sharing a video that gives you a bit of a good idea, an overview of what the ministry is all about. So I'm hoping this will work. So here we go. In this cell, your biggest enemy is time. You drown in the sea of it. You think in those first days, no one drifted to what was happening outside. So it's like, you know, no one knew what projects in the back.
I don't think we can see the video if you're sharing it now.
Oh, sorry.
You might have to switch the sharing tab.
Sorry, can you see that? You can't see it?
I can only see the PowerPoint.
Ah, okay.
You might have to
stop sharing, and this time share the video. Yes. Okay, sorry. I thought I did a tricky thing and embedded it in the PowerPoint, but it just doesn't. The tricky thing didn't work. So I'll start again.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Can't hear the video. There's an option when you share screen to share sound as well.
Oh, is there?
You need to click that.
Okay, I'll try again. Sorry about that, guys. I'll share screen.
Bottom left-hand corner.
Yep, got it. Yep. Okay, do you want me to optimize the video clip too? Do you reckon that was, can you see it okay?
Yeah, we can see it okay.
Okay. I'll start again. Take 3. How's that going?
In this cell,
thank you. I'm a bit of a
your biggest enemy is time. You drown in a sea of it. And you think. And think. In those first days, my mind drifted to what was happening outside. It's Wednesday, you know. I wonder what my wife is doing. What projects are the guys working on? Is anyone talking about me? Or have they all just moved on? The remorse and regret are constant companions. Over and over again, you remember that you've stuffed your life up. Reputation, family, friends, colleagues, all lost in the blink of an eye. And the guilt of the hurt you've caused is like a heavy weight that stays on your shoulders. I'll admit, there were days when I felt that all hope, all reason to continue had gone. I'll never forget the first time I was visited by Greg. I remember thinking it was strange that someone I'd never met wanted to come and talk to me. Up until then, I'd gotten pretty used to people wanting to distance themselves from me. In prison, you do everything you can not to draw attention to yourself. Don't tell jokes. Don't tell your story. Don't look people in the eye. But here, in these chairs, I could talk. I could laugh. I could share my regrets and talk openly about my failures. And it was met with kindness and friendship. Greg told me about himself. And in doing so, he told me about Jesus. I later learnt that close to 1,000 volunteers, men and women, are visiting prisoners, running programs, playing sports and leading Bible studies through Prison Fellowship. Prisoners like me have been profoundly impacted by this ministry. Through it, we've grown in character. We've taken responsibility. We've built self-control and we've expressed repentance. We've come to understand grace and forgiveness. And hope is powerful. It brings life and light to your soul. I found hope here, and it grew within me. I learnt dependence. I learnt to pray, really pray. I found myself with a peace that was totally at odds with my harsh and miserable situation. The gap between prison and the real world beyond the gates can be very daunting. You're asking the big questions again. How can I stay out for good this time? Is there anyone who can help me? Will I get a job? Can I restore those relationships? To have Greg and the others from Prison Fellowship to be there to help me bridge that gap was everything. Inmates are just like everyone else. They need purpose. They need grace. They need healing. They need someone to offer hope.
Thanks for watching that. That gives you a bit of a rough overview of where we're at. And the things that I like to about that version, about that video rather, is that through it, through Prison Fellowship and through meeting with a volunteer, he found hope. And I think that's really, that is really key, giving people some sort of hope and knowing that they can change and that there is a way out, that this is not a life that they're destined to living for the rest of their lives. And one of the programs we offer later on that I'll talk about is called Change on the Inside, which does just that. It's a program we offer in prisons to say, don't let people tell you that you'll never change. You can change through decisions that you make and things that you put in place in your life to help make you a better you, a better person. I'll just share again back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So, yeah, it shines. It was that gracious love, that care that someone showed to him, and it really stood out with me with the guy in the film, who was an actor, by the way, he's not an actual prisoner. And it was filmed in Parramatta Prison, which is no longer used as a prison. But I was talking about Fremantle Jail before. That's very much like what Fremantle Jail looked like when I started volunteering in WA. But the gracious love that someone showed to him, and just having someone be non-judgmental and listen to him, to hear what he had to say, to let him have a chance to talk and to unburden himself was really powerful. Through the gracious love of Jesus shared by volunteers going to prisons around Australia, people in prison discover a new hope that leads to an understanding that change is possible. A better life is more than a possibility. This results in healing and forgiveness and restoration of relationships, and the best relationship that can be restored is a relationship with God. And it is truly amazing to see that guys inside that have, and women inside that have discovered a new relationship with God. It's just great. As a spin-off, we see reduced rates of recidivism. Currently, the recidivism rate, which is the rate that people reoffend and go back into jail, at the moment nationwide is 45%. So nearly half of the prisoners, people that are released from prison, will reoffend and go back inside. Quite often it's because they don't know, they've got no hope and nothing else to live for. So we're hoping that we can reduce that recidivism rate by the programs and by volunteers going into prison. Recently, I was able to share a message with a church on John 4. And the passage from John 4 is where Jesus has an interaction with a woman at the well in Samaria. Interesting story, and it just, the more I dug into it, the more I unpacked it, the more I realized how subversive it was. What Jesus did was quite incredible in terms of upending social norms and social customs. So for starters, he talked to a woman, or even go earlier than that, he was in Samaria, which for a good Jewish boy, you wouldn't go to Samaria. And then he was talking to a woman, so a Jewish man, let alone a Jewish rabbi, would not be seen talking to a woman. That was just not what you did. And then the kind of woman she was obviously wasn't a woman with a great reputation. But he was just amazing the way he interacted with her. He didn't judge her. He just sat down and started by asking her for a drink, engaged her in conversation, and gradually she opened up to him. It struck me how Jesus, in his way, was so subversive and upending the social customs, but not in just for an iconoclastic kind of way, but because he was heralding in and introducing a new kingdom, the kingdom of God. And in the kingdom of God, it's totally different. Things are totally different. He was bringing in a kingdom which sought to restore relationships with the people who are lost. And so he did that with this woman, and he demonstrated that, and the effects of it was amazing. And it also struck me how close to prisoners this woman was. She was shunned by her community, even by her own village. She had to go and get water in the middle of the day because no one would let her draw water in the beginning of the day because of the kind of woman she was. So she didn't have a great reputation. And yet Jesus tenderly and carefully spoke to her and gently opened up himself to her, and she opened up to him, and he guided her to a better life, in a sense. She raced back, told her village, guess what? I just met this guy at the well. You've got to come and see him. And it doesn't say much in the Bible, But you can imagine when she races back into the village with the water, she didn't even bring a water jar. She left a water jar behind. And they all said, why should we listen to you? You're that woman. But it would have taken a bit of convincing, but they did come. The people of the village came to see him. And the result of it was he spent 2 days teaching in that village, and many became followers of Jesus. So what an amazing effect that was. And I thought, wow, what a parallel it is to our ministry. Jesus comes along and reaches out to the people who other people shun and don't want to know. And that's those people in prison, and says, I know what you're like. I know what's happened in your life, but I'm here to show you that there is a hope and there is a way to a restored relationship, both with God and with your families and with each other. So that really struck me when I saw it. Thought, wow, a story I've read so many times, and now sort of really leapt out to me in lots of different ways. So my story, I shared a little bit about my story earlier already. So I joined Prison Fellowship 3.5 years ago, after 30 years as a teacher and a school principal, both here in Perth and in regional Victoria. My connection with Prison Fellowship, though, went back to the 1980s, when soon after I got married, I was invited to join a team going into a prison for a whole day workshop. I took up the invitation with some nervousness, but the nervousness evaporated as soon as I got in, sat down in the room, and the prisoners walked in, and I just felt, this is right. I just felt, God, this is where you want me to be. And it was fantastic. We had a great day together. From that, I started volunteering with a team, a mixed team of different denominations, going into Fremantle Jail, which is very much like the prison in the video. And we went in once a week and ran a chapel service in the prison. I never got to go into the prison proper. We were only ever allowed to go into the chapel. Soon after, when I left Perth in 1990 to come to Victoria, they'd closed the prison. And when we went back to Perth on a visit, they were announcing tours of Fremantle Jail. So I thought, oh, there's my chance to get in and have a look. So I got in and had a look, and I could then see pretty Spartan conditions that they lived in. And yeah, it was such a blessing. And yet the guys just really blessed me. And I really entered that ministry not expecting to be the be all and end all with all the good knowledge, but expecting God to do a work in me as much as a work in the guys who came to our chapel service. So, and that's often the case. God works in my heart and does things with me just as much as I minister to others when I go into a prison. So I often say I was bitten by the bug and developed a strong passion for prison ministry after that. So in 2018, after moving to Melbourne after a career of teaching, I joined the PFA staff in a part-time capacity. 2020, I was full-time as a volunteers coordinator, and this year I was appointed as a state manager for Victoria. So yeah, so here I am. That was my connection with Prison Fellowship. So I love that little saying. We believe that even the most broken lives and situations can be restored and made whole again when we respond to God's call to serve men and women behind bars. And that really, I like to highlight the word call. With our volunteers, we always say, really, this should be something that you feel called to, not something that's just a flippant, I'll give it a go. It's something you really feel called to, because it's a pretty, can be a confronting ministry, but it's certainly something which I feel God calls people to. So that's what I really want to stress with our volunteers. How did it start? Prison Fellowship started with Chuck Colson. I don't know how much you know, but Chuck Colson was a right-hand man to Richard Nixon in the 70s, and got mixed up in an affair called the Watergate affair. And he was, I won't go into all the details. You can look it up yourself, I guess, online. But there were some criminal things some crimes committed with some journalists in Washington, DC, breaking into their offices, getting news and so on. And the long and the short of it was Chuck Colson was found guilty, and out of all of them, Richard Nixon, the president, was involved. He resigned before they could impeach him, and Chuck Colson was the one that ended up copying it and going to prison. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and spent 7 months in prison in Alabama. While in prison, he became strong. I mean, he had a faith background, but his faith grew, and he began to feel that his time in prison was for a purpose. And I loved it. If you look at a video of his life a little bit, he had the same attitude that a lot of people I've heard of have had that same sort of feeling. Before he went into prison, he often used to think of prisoners as them, those prisoners, or them. There must be some weird breed of people. But he said when he got into prison, he realized they're just ordinary men and women. They're just ordinary people, just like you and I. They've just made mistakes and they're now paying the consequences of their mistakes. But there's nothing different about them. They're just like you and I. And I think that really stood out to him. When he was released, he was walking out of the prison, and one of the men yelled out to him, one of his friends, "Hey, Chuck, don't forget about us when you get outside." And he said, "No, I won't. I won't forget about you." And he promised that he would do something. And so after being released in 1974, in 1976, he founded Prison Fellowship in America. And this took off, and it soon became an international mission. It is now the largest mission reaching out to people largely forgotten and ignored in society. And just a quote from Chuck Colson there. He passed away in 2012, I think. In Matthew 25, Jesus says, "I was in prison and you visited me." He calls upon his followers to minister to those who are behind bars. In other words, we will be judged in part by the way we treat those who are in prison. The fact that a man has committed a crime and is paying the price does not mean that he forfeits his God-given dignity. And I think that's a pretty powerful quote. And so the mission really grew from there. In Australia, the mission grew came to Australia in the 1980s, early 1980s. And in Victoria, in 1981, Prison Fellowship was founded and began working in Australian prisons. Very interesting, last year in the office, someone discovered a newsletter that dated back to 1980. And the initial committee, the steering committee, was made up of several men. One of them you might know. His name was Peter Costello. So he and his brother were involved in Prison Fellowship in the beginning. And the patron of the ministry was a man that maybe Helen and I will remember. It's Sir Eric Pearce. So I don't know if you know Eric Pearce. Yes, he used to be the Channel 9 newsreader for years and years when I was a kid anyway. And so he was our patron to begin with. I don't know if you realise that. But what impressed me even more about this old newsletter from the December 1980 was that in the newsletter they outlined the vision of Prison Fellowship. And as I was reading through the vision, I realised nothing has changed. We're still doing what the vision says. We have stuck to that vision, and I was really amazed that after 40 years, we're still on mission. And I think testimony to all the people who have worked in the mission beforehand that have really strived to keep that the ministry on mission and haven't let it drift into other areas. So that was really fantastic. And the mission really is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with prisoners and their families. And that's really where we're at. And to that end, we want to make sure we keep connected with groups like this and with churches. So we do a lot of church speaking and really interact with a lot of churches, because not only because we want to share the ministry, but also because it keeps us connected with the Christian community and keeps our vision front and foremost in our mind, that this is what we're on about, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. So in Australia, a ministry is found in every state and territory. There's a huge need for this ministry. There are over 42,000 people in prisons around the country. And if we add juvenile detention, that would even grow even more. In Victoria, we're looking at expanding the ministry and reach into a place called Thomas Embling. I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Embling Hospital. Thomas Embling Hospital is the place where people, when they're found not guilty due to mental impairment, are usually sent to serve out a sentence there. So we're actually looking at having an opportunity to go and send some volunteers in to interact with inmates, or with, I guess they call them patients, at this hospital, many of them who are there for many, many years. So we really see that that's another direction that we can share the love of Jesus in those areas. These numbers are not decreasing, and when you consider the recidivism rate, as I said earlier, running at about 45%, you can see that there's a real need and it's not going far away. I spoke with the chaplain at Tom Assembly, and his words to me were, there is as much need here as you've got volunteers available. So what he was really saying is there's a crying need for people of faith to come into this place and to share hope and to share the gospel. And we hear that now during our lockdown. We aren't able to go into prisons, but bits and pieces I hear coming back through are that prisoners are really hanging out to see prison fellowship volunteers. They really like to mix with the volunteers and to hear from them, be encouraged by them. So the need then is to reach people often feeling hopeless and resigned to a lifetime of incarceration with a message of restoration and transformation. Through the gospel message of love and forgiveness, people in prison can discover that there is a hope for change, for healing and for restoration. So how does PF respond to this need? There's one of our key verses. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters, you did for me. We take that to heart. How do we respond? So these are some of the programs that we have involved in there. But I should preface that by saying that God is at work at the moment in our Victorian ministry and in the New South Wales ministry as well. We're not able to get into prisons to do any of these things that are up on your screen now. But that doesn't stop God. God is still at work. On Friday morning, one of the volunteers for Port Phillip prison rang me. Said, "Hey, Richard, guess what?" I said, "What?" I heard from the prison that one of the guys there in one of the wings at Port Phillip, he started his own church service. And I thought, wow, that's good. He said, yeah, he had 2 people coming. He said, now he's got 25 people coming and they need some Bibles. So I thought, that is amazing. That the work continues no matter what. Even COVID lockdowns can't stop it. And this is something we have heard before, that prisoners themselves have been organising their own Bible studies, their own church services, their own worship times together. There are Christian people in prison and who are seeking fellowship that way. Some of them have even reached out and said to us, we want to keep doing this, but we're feeling empty. Can you help us to do some theological study? We'd like to enroll in some theological study. So we're now organising something with one of our state council members who used to work with MST, Melbourne School of Theology. So she's looking at doing ways we can offer a Cert 4 in theology to some of the guys inside. So that's an exciting development. So let's just go quickly through these programs. The key one in the middle is VIP, visiting in prison. So these are people, volunteers, that most of our volunteers do this, and they go into the prison. It's different in different states, but in Victoria, they get what's called a green pass, and they're allowed to go into the prison and walk amongst the prisoners in the wings and just build relationships, talk, share, pray, whatever they feel led to do, have quite a bit of freedom. As you can imagine, that can be a tricky situation. So all of our volunteers, everyone who volunteers with Prison Fellowship, has to do some training. And during the training, we stress some of the protective behaviours and things that we need to put in place to make sure that when you're in a situation like that, you are safe and acting safe. One of them is to always be in pairs, never to go on your own, and so on. But that's our key, our most central volunteer opportunity. I like to, because I've done a lot of training with volunteers, I like to tell them that it's not so much building friendships as it is being a mentor and going in on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis and helping them find ways to change and to be a better person. So typically our volunteers going into prison would go on a regular basis. We look for people who are committed to going long term. And so it's often older people who are retired who've got the time to do that. The other programs we have, you may have heard of. One's called Change on the Inside, based on Character First. And it's a 6-week program that we offer to prisoners. It's not overtly Christian. It's got Christian principles embedded in it, but it's basically, as I said before, tells prisoners, don't let people tell you you can't change. There are ways you can change your character. And so this is a character development program. The other one down the bottom corner is the Prisoner's Journey. This is one of our signature or key programs in prison fellowship nationally and internationally. The Prisoner's Journey is an 8-week course that we offer to prisoners, which basically says in 8 weeks, find out who Jesus is, why did he come, and what does it mean for me? So it's a gospel-based course. It's overtly gospel, but the prisoners have accepted it and allowed us to run it. One of the things we often struggle with in states is the fine line between offering a course and proselytizing. So they don't like it if we proselytize. So we have to be very careful how we conduct these programs. But we have a very good reputation here in Victoria, and so they allow us to run this program. In fact, a prison near Shepparton called Durringall Prison Farm contacting us and saying, hey, when are you guys able to come back and do the Prisoner's Journey? We'd like you to do another course. So they're asking us to do the course. And we say to the prisoners, if you've ever wondered what Christianity is about or who Jesus is, come along to this course. There's no, you don't have to stay. You can go if you want to. The main thing is at the end of it, you'll find out who Jesus was. And obviously we'd like it if you want to make a decision to follow Jesus, but there's no pressure. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's fine. At least you find out what Christianity is about. So that's the Prisoner's Journey, and it's based on Christianity Explored, and it was developed by an ex-prisoner in the UK who came out of prison and had become a Christian in prison, and this was his way of giving back. He went to Bible college and then rewrote Christianity Explored from a prison perspective, from a prisoner's perspective, and Prison Fellowship International took it on and rebadged it with his permission and with his help, and are now presenting this. This is now being run in 40 countries around the world in different languages, and it has reached 1 million prisoners around the world in terms of inviting them to hear the gospel message. So it's one of our key programs. Another one which I wish we could run in Victoria, we aren't running it here, and we're not able to for various reasons. It's running in other parts of the country. It's called the Sycamore Tree Project, and in this particular program, it's a restorative justice type program, and their prisoners are matched with a victim, not their victim, but a victim of crime. If we have volunteers who are willing to do that, and so they learn through that, a bit like Zacchaeus, really understanding what the implications of his acts were, the repercussions of his acts, the effects of his acts. And so the prisoner will come to terms with, first of all, admitting their crime and realizing their crime has had lots of consequences and effects on people and impact on people, and then finding forgiveness, reconciliation, forgiveness, and restoration. It's an amazingly successful program. It's an 8-week course, and I'd love to see if we could get that running. So we're praying for that to happen in Victoria here at the moment. The other one is SLAM. Some people might have heard of this one. It's called Sports Life's a Message, and we get teams of young people, not only young, teams of people, because we've got one of our SLAM leaders is my age, 60. So going in and playing soccer or playing basketball against teams within the prison. And during that time, so typically they might go in for a day, go in and have a series of matches, and in between the matches have time to chat with the men and women inside, and also share lunch together. That will obviously change due to COVID, so we'll see what happens. But the idea is that they, through going through playing a game, that they will actually have a chance to minister and share their testimony. So usually in the team, one person will share their testimony during the time that they're in there with the guys who are they're playing against. And they do play properly. They train for this. It's not just a hit and giggle, but so they spend time training, and they score, and they treat it seriously, because they're saying to the inmates, we respect you, and we're working towards doing this properly. We want to make sure that we recognise that you're we're not just patronising you. We want to compete with you on a level playing field in that sense. So there's some of the key programs. We also do Extraordinary Lives, which is reaching out to the children of prisoners. So this is a new rebadging of programs. So Extraordinary Lives is a catch-all name which covers one-on-one mentoring that we do with children, an annual camp that we run for kids, Angel Tree Christmas Tree program, which started from a lady who was a prisoner in the US. The Angel Tree program you may have heard of, which provides a Christmas gift for children of prisoners. And so the prisoners at the moment, we've just started running that for this year. We've been doing it for many years, for over nearly 40 years it's been running in Victoria. But how it typically starts is we send letters to the prisons, and the prisoners themselves can fill a form out and request a gift for their child, and then people donate presents, and then we make sure that the child gets a present for Christmas Day from their mum or dad in prison. And it's just another way of sharing the love of Jesus. We usually put a card in there with the meaning of Christmas or something, a gospel message in there as well. And prison visit support, we've got in some states we do that as well. So that's Extraordinary Lives. One thing I should add to the prison programs is that we also do letter writing. So we have quite a team of people who write letters to inmates, and sometimes some for many, many years. And the Easter biscuit bake, which some of you might have heard of before. Some of you might have contributed to even and baked biscuits for. But every Easter, we try and provide every prisoner in Victoria with a packet of 10 home-baked cookies and a gospel message in there for Easter. The last time we were able to do it, there were 8,200 prisoners in Victoria. And if there's 10 biscuits per prisoner, you can do the maths. I'm sure I don't have to get you. So incredibly, we received donations of 100,000 biscuits. So it was amazing. We were oversubscribed. We had more than enough. And the good thing is what we could do with the remnant of the biscuits that we weren't able to give out, we donated them to the Salvation Army to give to people on the street and to homeless shelters and so on. So yeah, but I've been in to Ravenhall prison and handed out bags of biscuits, and it's been truly amazing to see the effect of just a simple little gift like that on the people that receive it. And one of the things that stood out to me is one guy saying, I can't believe you would do this for us. I can't believe that you would do this for us. So one of the biggest things that people in prison have is that they feel that people are rejecting them. So a little act like baking biscuits for them shows a sign of acceptance. I'm accepting you as a person, as a human being, and I want to show you some love. Angel Tree, yep, that's our Angel Tree logo. Post-release, we don't do a lot of work in post-release at the moment. We have a program called T24, which assists people who are leaving prison. It's not expansive at the moment, so we're looking at whether maybe we can find out ways to grow that. It needs more volunteers, but T24 means the first 24 hours after prison, when they've been released from prison. So typically what will happen is the prison will ring our key volunteer who does that and say, Billy Bloggs is being released from Port Phillip prison on the 15th of September. Can somebody come and pick him up? He needs a lift to Berwick, or he needs a lift to Geelong. So we've got some volunteers that go out in pairs, and we'll do that, and they'll pick the person up and take them to where they need to go, make sure they're okay, that they've got what they need. Maybe sometimes help them with connecting with Centrelink, or for some people who have been in for a long time, coming out into the community is like another world, like another planet. So helping them navigate through some of the things there. What we'd like to do is to see if we can continue that relationship and grow that a bit more, and offer a bit more in terms of employment help, even things like getting furniture and setting up a place to live and so on. It does happen from time to time, but in a more sort of one-off basis, not in a deliberate program. So we're looking at that, where we can expand the post-release work that we're doing. And as I said, we do families ministry. So I thought I'd continue with some feedback stories. I guess that's often what people appreciate. And one of the things I shared earlier was the fact that the guy was leading a church service in his own prison, and it grew from 2 to 25. an old volunteer, a fellow called Kevin Maddock, who's been a volunteer with us for many, many years. In fact, he started volunteering in prisons before Prison Fellowship started. From when he was 16 years old, he was going into prisons. He said to me something that really struck me last year. He said, I had to learn that I wasn't taking God into the prison. God was already there. I just needed to discover what God was doing and get in and work with him. And I think that was a real light bulb moment for me, that we're not bringing the gospel in a sense. God's already there. We're just getting in and working alongside him and helping to grow the work that's happening in that particular prison. And he will find ways of growing that ministry and growing his word and his people in that prison. Last year and right now, we discovered that groups of people in two prisons, as was said, were meeting together of their own accord and doing their own worship services and Bible studies because none of our volunteers could get in. TPJ is one of the courses I said earlier. That's one of our flagship courses. And here's some quotes from some participants over the last, just courses that have run this year. And not many of them have been able to run because of prison lockdowns. But here we go. One lady wrote, "Every course gives me hope." Another lady wrote, "TPJ is the best course I've ever done. I've been going to church all my life and I never understood why Jesus came, but now I get it." And I think that was actually that I know that was a guy in New South Wales that said that. And he'd been brought to church all the time as a kid. And then doing the TPJ course, finally the penny dropped and he understood what it was all about. Another quote, after a course earlier this year, a facilitator wrote, "One participant hadn't contributed for 7 out of 8 weeks. Then in week 8, there was a change to her face, the manner, everything changed. She declared herself a believer and spontaneously jumped up and signed her name on the whiteboard to show it." That was in Darwin, a TPJ course up there. Another participant, "This course helped me to have a relationship and a connection with God and Jesus and helped me receive Jesus in my heart and learn that I can walk with him on this path." To me, that's gold when I get stuff like that. I love to see directly the feedback from people like that. So where to from here? We usually finish our presentations with this 3-pronged call to action, I suppose. Pray, give, go. Pray. You can support us by praying. And that's one of our main supports. Every Monday morning we have a prayer meeting, online prayer meeting that started last year and has been growing every Monday. It's our annual week of prayer this week. And today our focus for prayer for Tuesday is restorative justice programs. Prayer is a huge priority. It's foundational to our ministry. So we dedicate a whole week to prayer. Prayer keeps us connected to God and helps us to stay on mission. We recognize that we're often engaged in a spiritual battle. So we do need to pray and we need to be engaged in that regularly. Give, we depend totally on donations. We are blessed as a ministry with many kind people who donate big and small. And often I say it's the small amounts given regularly that can have a profound effect. Someone said $15 a month will pay for three prisoners to do the prisoner's journey course. So that's amazing. And the third prong is go. Volunteer with us if you feel God is calling you. There's an amazing effect from the volunteer. Someone spoke to me last year about the power of a volunteer, and I never understood it until I really began to think about it. And I thought, yeah, there is. And it was told me when I first started with Prison Fellowship, when I started working here. And they said, prisoners really appreciate it when volunteers come in and do things, because when staff come in and do courses, they're paid to do it. They know they're paid to do it. But when people come in and volunteer to do things, that really has a profound impact, because they say, you don't have to be here to do this, yet you're still doing it. And that has a really, very big impact and important it touches people inside. So that's our pray, go, give, go. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our ministry with you. And I think now it's time for questions. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, they can just turn on their mic and ask directly, or they can message in the chat or message me directly, and I'll share it with everyone.
I did see Emma here before. Is Emma here? Yeah, there she is. No, Emma? Yeah. Amy, sorry, Amy. I was thinking of Amy, not Emma. Sorry, got the names wrong. So Amy's been done the training. I was present on the training. Have you done the volunteers training yet? I think. No, she's done the info session. That's right. I'm trying to think, because Amy came to us and came to an information session, and then wants to join us as a volunteer. So when we do the next training session, she'll come along to that. But she's doing some work with us in what's supposed to be Camp for Kids, but that had to get cancelled because of COVID. And so now she's going to help us out with some work in Angel Tree. So connecting with families. Yeah.
We have a question asking, how do you know if God has called you to be involved with Prison Fellowship, or called you to be a volunteering for Prison Fellowship?
Yep, that's a good question. Often I would say to that is to just join us for an information session. Send us an email, say, look, I'm interested in the ministry. I'm just exploring whether this is something God wants me to do. And we'll invite you to an information session. We're having one tonight. It'll have to be online, of course, but we're doing, no, not tonight, tomorrow night. And after the information session, I usually say, if you're interested in volunteering, I don't have application forms because we go through an application process. I don't have forms here for you to fill out straight away because I want you to go home and just pray about it. And if you feel like it's something you want to do, then send me an email and I'll send you an application form. And then we'll start the process going that way. So yeah, really, it's really prayerful. And sometimes it's a bit of a stepping out thing. When I first started with Prison Fellowship, it was in a small group, and the leader of that group said, anyone interested in joining me for this workshop in the prison in a couple of weeks' time? And yeah, so I put my hand up, yeah, I'll do that. And when I actually got there, I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? You know, what is this? You know, you're looking at this massive wall with barbed wire and electric gates, and it was really felt very threatening. But while I was there, when I went in, I realized straight away, this is it. It was really strongly confirmed for me that that was what I should do. And sometimes it takes a bit of a stepping out and stepping into a ministry to realize that, yeah, it's for me. And conversely, sometimes people come in and think, maybe it's not for me. I don't think this is where I should be. So, yeah, it's just listening to God and hearing what he's got to say. Yeah.
There was also another question. I think you might have been chatting about this a bit earlier before we might have started, but yeah, why do you think there is a bit of a less divide, I guess, between the denominations within Prison Fellowship Australia? You said there was quite a mix of denominations between workers. Yeah, do you think there's anything different, I guess, from churches and other Christian organizations?
Yep, it's something we work at as well, and we stress, and we're accepting of people of all different denominational backgrounds. And I think our mission helps with that. It's a simple, basic gospel that most people can follow, you know, and can adhere to. And so I think that's what really reaches out to people. And we don't get involved in we don't do baptisms, or we don't do communion, or any of those things that can sometimes be different in denominations. But most evangelical denominations and all sorts of denominations can be united in the fact that we're sharing Jesus and the good news of the gospel. So it's a pretty simple gospel message which resonates with just about every denomination. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to ask if you have any on your mind.
Have any of you heard of Prison Fellowship before? Yeah? No. Or you have now, I suppose, but it's interesting to see if you'd heard of before I started to join you. Yeah.
I had a question. You said that part of what prison fellowship does is provide hope. Are there any lessons that we can learn in kind of providing that hope to people on the outside in different circumstances from prison fellowship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we provide in terms of hope is the fact that the trajectory that your life is on doesn't have to be, if it's on a downward trajectory, there is hope to change, and that finding faith in Jesus can help to change that trajectory, to finding a restored relationship with God, to be the person who you're meant to be. And I think that would resonate with people in prison, but also on the outside, perhaps people who are controlled. There's a lot of people who are in prison, but they're not in jail, if you know what I'm saying. They're controlled by behaviors or addictions and things like that, saying there is a better way. And the better way is to finding a life with God, a life with Jesus, that where God is restoring you to the relationship, so he can be who he created you to be, and to serve him in that way, and finding a new direction in your life. So I think you could share that with people no matter where they are. And yeah, there is hope. And I think often it's modeled by people ourselves, by us. It's not a matter of us speaking down or telling people. And that's what I tell the volunteers in training. It's all about you sharing your story, and saying things that, your testimony. If you've ever gone to, when you're at church, if you ever hear someone giving their testimony, I always say people giving their testimony really resonates with people. I love to hear how people have come, their life journey, how they've come through things, and how they've come to the Lord, and or come to follow Jesus, or discovered a relationship with God. That really has an impact. During the Prisoner's Journey course, each session of the course is bookended by two videos, and the videos are of people in prison who've discovered a relationship with Jesus, and they're really powerful videos. And at the end of the courses, I was used to be the coordinator for the course nationally, excuse me, and the feedback I often get back is, more videos, please show us more videos. We love the videos. And that really hits people, not only because they see on the video someone who's like them, someone who was in prison and who found God and found hope and found a new life. And so I think the answer to your question, with people who are not in prison, but walking around perhaps at uni or whatever, we say to them, I found something which has really changed my life and given me much greater purpose and hope in life. And I'd like to share that with you because it's made a difference to me. And yeah, that's to me how the best way of sharing it, by being a testimony.
Really great answers all around. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard. Probably end off there unless anyone else has any pressing questions. Are you happy if anyone contacts you if they need to on your email, if they have any more questions about prison fellowship?
Yeah, sure. Or if you're interested in coming along to an information session, there's never any obligation. It's just a good way to get an idea of the ministry. Much of what you've heard today is probably what we cover at the information session. But yeah, feel free to email. Do you have my email address? Oh, Sarah has it, isn't it?
Yeah, I have. If anyone needs to contact him, they can ask me. Perfect. All right. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing with us and taking the time to help us all learn more about Prison Fellowship Australia. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming along and joining us today. Yeah, you're free to head off if you need to.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm happy to come and talk again sometime if you ever want me to come back. So thanks for that, Sarah, and thanks, Helen. Good to see you.
Thank you for coming. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard.